"Ma'am," he said, voice gruff, "I'm going to need you to step aside." Elise paused for only a moment. "Is there a problem?" "First-class boarding only right now, you need to wait." Elise calmly reached into her blazer and produced her boarding pass. The first-class ticket gleamed under the light, but Trevor didn't even look at it. He took it from her hand, gave it a cursory glance, then slipped it into his pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "I'd like that returned." He stepped closer. "You in a rush to get somewhere, sweetheart?" The word hit like a slap. A second flight attendant, a younger woman named Riley, shifted nervously by the galley. She clearly recognized the tension but said nothing. Just watched. "I need to take my seat," Elise said firmly. "Then you'll follow my procedure," Trevor snapped. "And that includes random security checks. Let's go." He didn't give her time to respond. With one heavy hand on her upper arm, he steered her away from the boarding area, past the cockpit, into a small crew preparation area just beyond the galley. The air inside was cool and still. There was a fold-down seat in the corner, a rolling cart of service equipment, and a pair of scissors sitting idle on a shelf. Elise's heart thudded once in her chest. "I don't consent to this," she said clearly. "You have no legal cause to detain me." "You're acting suspicious," he replied, motioning to the seat. "Sit down." She didn't move. He leaned in close. "You think that first-class ticket means something? Not on my flight. Not to me." In an instant, two other crew members entered the space. One of them, a man in his 30s with a shaved head and nervous eyes, grabbed her left wrist. Another held the other side of the chair. Elise's voice rose. "This is a violation. I want your names." But no one answered. Instead, Trevor grabbed the scissors. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Standard protocol," he said. "You could be hiding something in that bag." Elise tried to rise, but a sharp grip pushed her back down. Trevor unzipped her leather briefcase and began rummaging through her personal items, her judicial notes, her legal briefs, her medication. He pulled out a small decorative hair clip with an attached scarf, a gift from her grandmother, and held it up. "What's this for?" he demanded. "It's a hair accessory," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Looks like it could be used as a weapon." He took the scissors and cut through the delicate fabric of the scarf, then snipped the metal clip in half. Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She sat there as her dignity was stripped from her, watching pieces of a family heirloom fall to the floor like fragments of her heritage being torn away. Laughter echoed from one of the crew. "Just following protocol," he muttered. "Should have come in here with some respect," Trevor said, wiping scissors against his sleeve. "Now we can proceed properly." Elise's fists clenched in her lap, the skin over her knuckles pale. But her voice, when it returned, was steady. "You'll regret this." He leaned down, sneering. "People like you always say that." And then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. Trevor opened the door and gestured toward the cabin. "You're free to go. First class is that way," he said mockingly. Elise rose slowly, hands trembling only slightly. She took her boarding pass back from Trevor's pocket without asking, and walked out into the main cabin. Her steps were even, her expression unreadable. But in her chest, something burned hotter than rage, deeper than humiliation. It was purpose. And in just a few minutes, that purpose would change everything. Because what Trevor didn't know was this: she wasn't there as a tourist. She wasn't there for leisure. She wasn't there as just another passenger. She was the federal judge assigned to hear the class-action discrimination lawsuit against the airline. And she was about to witness firsthand exactly what the plaintiffs had alleged. The scissors' metallic click echoed in her ears long after she left that cold, cramped space. Every step she took toward her seat felt heavier than the last, not because of fear, but because of fury held in check. The remains of her grandmother's scarf still lay discarded in that crew room. Decades of family history and cultural significance dismissed as potential contraband. The silence in the aisle felt suffocating. Elise passed two passengers who looked at her, then quickly looked away. They had heard. Maybe they had even seen, but not one of them had spoken up. She didn't stop walking. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. At the front of the cabin, a low hum of voices filtered throughout first class. It was a high-profile flight. Several executives from the airline's corporate office were on board. National press covering their new international routes, heavy media presence. Elise was supposed to blend in, observe discreetly. Her court case waiting back in Chicago. Staff prepped. Evidence being gathered. Decorum preserved. But today that plan didn't matter. She stopped at her assigned seat. 2A, took a deep breath, then settled into it with deliberate slowness. The cabin stilled instantly. Conversations cut off mid-sentence, heads turned, and then recognition began to ripple. Not of her identity, but of her presence. The woman they had watched be escorted through the cabin like a security threat was now seated in first class. Her leather briefcase, rifled through and hastily repacked, sat heavy on her lap. Some passengers stared in confusion, others in disbelief. From the galley Trevor was watching, his face a mask of professional indifference that didn't quite reach his eyes. Elise placed her briefcase under the seat in front of her and turned slowly to face the window. Her face was calm, cold even. The kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from precision. Someone near the business section dropped a magazine. The flight attendant, the same man who had held the scissors, was now serving pre-flight drinks. When she made eye contact with him, he went absolutely still. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached for the airline's safety card, studying it with exaggerated care. She didn't wait for service. She didn't ask for assistance. She simply sat, one slow breath at a time. A different flight attendant approached. Riley, the one who had witnessed everything without intervening. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" she asked, voice cracking. "Water, please," Elise said. "And your name for my records." Riley's hand shook as she poured the water. "Riley Evans, ma'am." Elise nodded once, then took the offered glass, the liquid trembling slightly as turbulence from the taxiing aircraft vibrated through the cabin. She looked straight ahead. Her gaze never touched the man who had humiliated her. Not yet. Not directly. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 2207 to Chicago O'Hare. We're currently number 3 for takeoff and should be airborne in just a few minutes." A chorus of seatbelt clicks followed, passengers settling in as if nothing unusual had happened. Some were engrossed in tablets, others already dozing off. From across the aisle, a man in an expensive suit kept glancing her way, his expression a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Elise ignored them all. The plane accelerated down the runway, engines roaring as steel and aluminum defied gravity. They climbed steadily into the morning sky, the ground falling away beneath them. From the corner of her eye, she saw Trevor slowly moving through the cabin, distributing hot towels to first-class passengers. His hands were steady, but his face betrayed a nervousness that hadn't been there before. His legs shifted restlessly as he worked. He looked like he wanted to disappear, like he knew deep in his gut that his moment was coming. He was right. After reaching cruising altitude, the captain turned off the seatbelt sign. The first round of drink service began. Elise stayed seated, watching as Trevor carefully avoided her section, assigning Riley to serve her row instead. When Riley approached with the drink cart, Elise finally spoke again. "Ms. Evans, I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant, please." Riley's face paled. "That would be Trevor, ma'am." "Then please inform Trevor I'd like to speak with him. He's very busy with service right now." Elise's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Tell him Judge Washington would like a word." The effect was immediate. Riley's eyes widened in recognition, then horror. "Judge—" "Now please," she obeyed, moving quickly to the galley where Trevor was arranging glasses. Their whispered exchange was intense, but brief. Trevor's head snapped up, his eyes finding Elise across the cabin. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, like a man walking toward his execution, he approached her seat. "You requested to see me?" His voice was professional but strained. Elise motioned to the empty seat beside her. "Sit down, Mr. Linden." His mouth opened. "I'm on duty, I can't—" That wasn't a request. He blinked, then slowly lowered himself into the seat. "State your full name for the record." He shifted nervously. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Trevor James Linden. How long have you served as a flight attendant with this airline?" 17 years. She tapped a finger against her armrest. Once, twice. Then she leaned forward. "And in those 17 years, how many women have you assaulted in that preparation area?" The color drained from his face. Your Honor, I didn't know." "That's not what I asked." He looked around for help. None came. "How many complaints have been filed against you, Mr. Linden?" I'm not sure." Elise's voice rose, not in volume but in precision. 23. 23 formal complaints, all buried, all dismissed. Because you hid behind procedure and protocol. His mouth trembled. "I didn't know who you were. I thought—" "And that's the problem, isn't it?" she snapped, her voice cracking the stillness. "You thought I was no one. Just another black woman you could bully, violate, humiliate for sport." The row around them was dead silent. Passengers pretended to look elsewhere, but everyone was listening. "You didn't even bother to ask for my name." Trevor tried to speak, but no sound came. Elise leaned in closer. "Because of you, this aircraft, this supposed vessel of public accommodation, has been stained. Because of your actions, the safety of passengers is now under question. And because you assaulted a federal judge during official court observation, you are now the subject of a criminal investigation." She turned to look over her shoulder, gesturing toward two men in plain clothes who had been seated in business class. Effective immediately. The men rose, air marshals who had been briefed before boarding. They moved with quiet efficiency toward the front of the plane. "No, wait, Trevor stammered. "You can't do this." But he was wrong. She already had. The cabin didn't feel like a normal flight anymore. Not after what had just happened. Trevor Linden, once a fixture of control and intimidation on these routes, was now seated in the back row, flanked by air marshals, his airline wings removed, his authority stripped. But the aftershock still lingered. It was in the silence, in the way the engines hummed a little too loudly, in the sidelong glances shared between crew members who had known for years and said nothing. Elise Washington sat back in her seat, fingers laced together on her lap, her presence now unmistakable. There was no going back to the way things were before, and truthfully, she didn't want to, because something had shifted. Not just inside her, but inside the entire aircraft. Riley approached cautiously, holding a tablet. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "the captain would like to speak with you when it's convenient." Elise nodded. "How long until we land?" "About 2 hours." Elise looked past her out into the now tense cabin. Rows of passengers, some pretending to sleep, others watching with undisguised interest. But she could still feel Trevor's presence like an oil stain on polished metal. She exhaled slowly. This flight had already defied every expectation, and they were only at the halfway point. From the galley, a young flight attendant approached. Male, maybe early 20s. Name tag reading, Marcus. Serious expression. Never making eye contact unless necessary. He looked troubled. Elise gave a small nod. "Everything okay?" Marcus hesitated. Then he leaned down and spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to say I saw it. What happened with Mr. Linden at boarding? I didn't know what to do. I should have said something. I was scared." Elise didn't answer right away. She just studied the young man's trembling hands. Then she said gently, "Thank you for telling me. That matters. I didn't stop it." "No," Elise replied. "But you're speaking now. That's more than most." Marcus looked like he might collapse with the weight of his guilt. But he straightened his shoulders and added, "If you need me to testify about this or the other incidents, I will." Elise reached across the armrest and placed a hand over his, just for a moment. No words, just acknowledgement. Then the cabin intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for our initial approach into Chicago. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. The crew moved with a new kind of precision, their usual banter absent. Even the passengers seemed to sense the shift. This wasn't just a flight anymore. It was evidence. As the aircraft began its descent, the atmosphere in the cabin had changed. Subtly, sharply. The power dynamics were no longer in question. This wasn't just air travel anymore. It was a reckoning. During final approach, a passenger seated 2 rows behind Elise caught her attention. An older black woman, mid-60s, elegant but weary, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Their eyes met briefly, and the woman nodded, a silent gesture of recognition and gratitude. When the wheels touched down at O'Hare, the usual post-landing bustle was muted. Nobody rushed to stand. Nobody pushed toward the exits. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, passengers rose with unusual care, as if the air itself had become fragile. Elise remained seated, watching as Trevor was escorted from the aircraft first, before any other passengers disembarked. The airline's ground staff waited at the gate, looking grim-faced and uncertain. Among them stood a tall woman in a crisp suit, the airline's chief legal counsel, already preparing damage control for what was about to unfold. Only when the last passenger had filed past her seat did Elise finally rise. Riley stood nearby, pale but determined. Elise absorbed this information without visible reaction. But inside, puzzle pieces were falling into place. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was pattern and practice. As Elise stepped from the aircraft, the jetway felt longer than usual. At the end of it, beyond the gate area, a small group of people waited. Her law clerks, representatives from the Civil Rights Division, court reporters ready to document everything while it was still fresh. But before she reached them, Elise paused and turned to Riley, who had followed her out. "Ms. Evans," she said, her voice professional but not unkind, "you'll be receiving a formal subpoena by tomorrow morning. Prepare accordingly." The terminal was busy, but a strange pocket of stillness surrounded Elise as she walked. Perhaps it was her posture, or the intensity in her eyes, or the way the airline staff seemed to visibly shrink as she passed. As they reached the airport exit, Elise finally allowed herself a deep breath, not out of relief but resolve. Today wasn't over, not even close, because the courtroom may have seen Trevor Linden fall, but they hadn't seen what came next. And the real reckoning was still to come. The car waiting to take her to the courthouse was already running, its driver standing at attention as she approached. Chicago's skyline loomed in the distance, stark against the morning sky. The courtroom would be full when she arrived, but it wouldn't be the same room anymore. Something unspoken had shifted. It hung in the air like a promise, like a warning, like justice, too long deferred, finally demanding to be served. And this time, there would be no place for them to hide.